Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jan Szrawiński. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived in Warsaw today. The visit was confirmed by the Polish authorities, who had previously kept the information about his arrival secret. President Zelenskyy's visit began with a meeting with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The meeting is scheduled to be followed by a press conference later on. The next official engagement is a meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda at the Belvedere Palace. His talks with the top two Polish politicians are expected to cover further support for Kyiv in its fight against Russia. The issue of Ukraine's accession negotiations during the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union is also set to be a top priority. Poland expects to open the first negotiating cluster with Ukraine. Also important in the context of the visit is Kyiv's first agreement in years to exhume Polish victims of the Ukrainian insurgent army during World War II. Later in the afternoon, Zelenskyy will engage with students at the Warsaw School of Economics, a prominent university in Warsaw. And we can now see live images from the conference room where the press briefing of President Zelenskyy and Prime Minister Donald Tusk is scheduled to take place. We'll be coming back to this later on. We're moving on to our next story. A meeting of the NATO Military Committee and the chiefs of staff of allied countries is held in Brussels today. And this is chaired by the committee's head, Admiral Rob Bauer.
The next summit in The Hague is about 6 months, 5.5 months away. And our objective is clear. We must continue to do all we can, all together, to keep all of our people safe. Our future security is at stake. Russia's war against Ukraine rages on. Russian hostile actions against our own countries are accelerating, with cyber attacks, assassination attempts, acts of sabotage and more. We used to call this hybrid, but these are destabilization actions and campaigns. Russia is hard at work to try to weaken our democracies and chip away at our freedom. And it is not alone. It has China, North Korea and Iran by its side. Meanwhile, many other dangers persist, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, disinformation and climate change. So the security picture does not look good, but we know exactly what we need to do to protect it. We are already doing a lot here together. All allies have been increasing investment in defense. Thanks to you, our military leaders, we have robust military plans in place. The readiness of our forces has increased. Military exercises are larger and more frequent. And this is all essential but not sufficient to deal with the dangers coming our way in the next 4 or 5 years.
Our tasks are to strengthen the deterrence and defense of the alliance and at the same time support Ukraine in its resistance against Russia's unprovoked aggression. As Mr. Luntz once said, NATO is the most important organization for peace the world has ever known. And Machiavelli taught us that the best way to do that is to prepare for war. Not because war is inevitable, but because being better prepared for war strengthens our deterrence, which in turn minimizes the chance of war being fought on Allied soil. Mr. Secretary General, in your landmark speech at Carnegie Europe last month, you called on allies to shift to a wartime mindset and turbocharge our defense production and defense spending. You stated that in order to prevent war, NATO must invest more. And you stated that we need to be better prepared for what is coming our way in 4 to 5 years.
Meanwhile, Russia launched a massive missile strike on Ukraine, targeting multiple regions of the country. In response, Poland scrambled military aircraft to protect its airspace. Military aviation operations in the Polish airspace have now been concluded, but the situation in Ukraine remains tense. Ukraine issued air raid alerts throughout the country in connection with the attack. Over 40 missiles were launched in this attack, 30 of which were shot down by Ukraine, according to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In the city of Lviv, critical infrastructure was damaged. The strike also forced hundreds of Kiev residents to take shelter in a metro station. The New York Times recently reported that packages catching fire at airports in various European cities were part of a Russian sabotage plan. With less than 1 week left in office, US President Biden's team has been trying to send a clear message to Russian leader Vladimir Putin to put a stop to these activities. An investigation from the White House revealed that the plan was to find out how to bypass security at the borders and send explosive packages to American soil. The packages consisted of consumer goods like electric massagers that would catch fire once unloaded. While the main concern is regarding cargo planes, sometimes passenger planes also take smaller packages in the spare space available. President Putin can no longer blackmail us with oil, said Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala earlier on Tuesday. The country has successfully completed the upgrades to the Transalpine pipeline, doubling its capacity and ending the Central European country's dependence on Russian crude.
We can now say that we have reached a situation where Vladimir Putin can no longer blackmail us with oil, not even by cutting off our oil supply. The project is now technologically ready. We are able to ensure the supply of oil from the west to the Czech Republic. Increasing the capacity of the Transalpine pipeline will provide the Czech Republic with an additional 4 million tons of crude.
Foreign Affairs Kaja Kallas is expected to choose Petr Sorensen to become the bloc's new special envoy for dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, replacing Miroslav Lajčák. Dane Petr Sorensen is a career diplomat and former EU Special Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina with over 15 years of experience in the Western Balkans region. The mandate of Lajčák remains in force until the end of January. This is when the new envoy will take his place. Following the nomination by Kallas, the EU member states must now also agree on Sorensen as Lajčák's successor. The election campaign for the Polish presidential election 2025 has officially begun. Polish citizens will cast their votes to elect their new president on the 18th of May. The Polish presidential candidates have officially begun their race for the presidential palace. So far, 10 candidates have proclaimed their candidacies, 8 men and 2 women. According to recent polls by United Surveys, the top candidates are Civic Coalition's Rafał Trzaskowski, the mayor of Warsaw, and Karol Nawrocki, an independent candidate endorsed by the main opposition party, Law and Justice. The Speaker of the Polish Parliament, Szymon Hołownia, is seeing his support dwindle, while a far-right candidate, Sławomir Mencen, backed by the Confederation Party, is gaining popularity. US President Joe Biden will remove Cuba from its terrorism blacklist as part of a prisoner release deal, according to the White House. Shortly after Biden's decision was announced, Cuba released a statement saying that it would free 553 prisoners from its jails. The agreement between the two countries takes place just days before US President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Trump reinstated the Caribbean country's terror label in the final days of his first presidency back in 2021. President Biden's decision will now effectively lift Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism, easing sanctions on the island, which is suffering from a deep economic crisis. In the current situation, establishing a Palestinian state will surely be a Hamas state, said Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar when asked about the possibility of a two-state solution. According to the latest reports, Israeli and Hamas negotiators are nearing a ceasefire hostage deal in Qatar.
We are negotiating a gradual deal. The first step will be implemented during 42 days. And during those 42 days, if a deal will be achieved, we will start to negotiate a little bit more than 2 weeks after the beginning on the second phase, which will be, of course, more complicated. With regard to the issue of a Palestinian state, in the current situation, establishing a Palestinian state will surely be a Hamas state. There is a reason why the Palestinian Authority didn't handle or didn't make elections since 2005, already for 20 years. There is a good reason. And a Hamas state will not only not solve the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, but will deteriorate security, peace and stability in the region.
Impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has reportedly refused to testify following his arrest, according to the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. Yoon was arrested over his ill-fated declaration of martial law last month, anti-corruption investigators said on Wednesday. According to the Corruption Investigation Office, Yoon has exercised his right to remain silent during a 2.5-hour questioning. Yoon submitted himself after more than 3,000 police officers marched on his residence to arrest him in the early hours of Wednesday. In a video message before his arrest, Yoon said that he had agreed to cooperate with the authorities to avoid bloodshed, but called the investigation against him illegal. And with this, we conclude this news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.